and welcome to the next edition of Chocobo Chasers. We are completely and absolutely thrilled to let you know about our special guest today. We'd like to extend a very, very gracious welcome to actor Raphael Sbarge, whom you may recognize in the gaming industry as the voice of Cade Nolenko in the Mass Effect trilogy, as well as Carth Onasi in arguably one of the greatest RPGs of all time, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Raphael, it's awesome to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
In addition to voiceover roles, Raphael also has roles in so many different projects. Literally, if you look over his IMDb list, there's going to be projects that you're going to be like, oh my gosh, he was in that. Ranging from Dr. Archie Hopper and Once Upon a Time. You were very recently in the Dahmer series from Netflix, which gained some very critical acclaim. And even more recently, you've also been taking the director's chair. One of your more recent projects was the docuseries 10 Days in Watts. So definitely very diversified in terms of your media portfolio. So let's go ahead and let's get started here. So in terms of just kind of your history, as I mentioned, obviously there's a lot of different things that kind of play in as far as like acting, directing. Was there anything specifically that kind of had you move into voiceover in addition to acting?
Yeah, I mean, look, we as actors love what we do. We're storytellers, and we're always looking for ways to kind of do that, right? So, I mean, if you're a musician, you're always looking for a place to play. Like,
Right.
maybe you don't play jazz, but like, hey, like my friend's got a band and he needs a guitarist, and so you jump in, right? So, like, hey, let's just go play, right? So, it's that kind of a thing where I mean, I've been very very privileged and fortunate that I've been able to, continue to kind of work for so long. But at the time when I started doing video games, they were still relatively kind of on the margins, and of course now they've eclipsed everything else. But I, had the privilege of being a part of these two giant franchises, and they are. It is such an honor to be in them. It is such a remarkable community to be connected to, and I like every single day I get people reach out, whether through Twitter or X or Cameo or what, on Facebook. I mean, it just, from a kind of a clearly Mass Effect and Knights of the Republic are more than just video games. They're kind of like life experiences. I mean, I've
Right.
seen so many tattoos and like, kind of things that people really do permanently to express how deeply these characters and this world have affected them and set them on sort of a life journey. And so again, to be a small part of that is just, it's such a privilege. And so I love it. I mean, I started in the theater. I my mother was a Broadway costume designer and my dad was a playwright, and they met at Yale, and it literally sort of grew up backstage. And so being in the theater and working, I've got a little puppy dog here, who, by the way, keeps biting my hand.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're totally fine. We
yeah,
all deal with it.
yeah. um, um, uh, you know, working working in a video game is a unique thing in that, for people who don't know, you really come into a kind of a bulletproof room, soundproof room with an engineer behind this double plate glass, and you're there for 4 hours at a time, basically you and your imagination, and it's all about kind of uh how a line kind of courses through you in the moment, I'm very aware of the fact is that there's a um it's very different than the playing experience, because also, we're not even interacting with other characters. You have very intimate scenes, right? Particularly with Caden, for example, and I'm alone in a room, you know what I mean, with a microphone, right? So the thing is, of course, it's all, it's like it's the setting you find yourself in, though. So because BioWare obviously is sort of, the gold standard of game makers, and again, to be put in such an incredible world with so much sort of firepower, as it were, that BioWare brings, and their writing. That was the hallmark of really what they did, and have done so beautifully, which is kind of really create characters that you have relationships with, right? It wasn't just sort of shooting things and killing things. I mean, yeah, there's some of that too, but there are these really powerful relationships that you form, and that was because of the writing. And at least initially, from what I understand, more women came into gaming because of the Mass Effect writing. I believe the writing, but the characters, the relationships. But more women came into gaming at the point that Mass Effect dropped than any other game prior. And again, and then I know that as they were able to evolve with the writing in terms of being able to sort of have then, same-sex relationships, that really also had such a profound effect. And I believe had implications in terms of just deep ways in which culture and artists can change opinion and form ideas and open people's hearts and minds. And I had some very, sorry, I'm just rambling here.
Oh,
Just
this is amazing. Please, we love it.
I remember having very intimate conversations with people at the very beginning, like even 10, 12 years ago, with people sort of exploring gender identity and what that meant and how the game had helped form, their sense of identity by virtue of their role play and their ability to sort of explore different genders and how important that was. This one fellow had really, I think was doing his master's in the game, had written, kind of this incredible piece about, what societal implications were of being able to explore gender in an environment where you were able to be judged by your character and not by, your physical body, as it were, and that it was transformative. So again, these are just tip of the iceberg of how this game formed and informed so much and so many people, and across so many different cultures. I mean, obviously it got translated into a lot of different other languages, but it played well everywhere. There's something about this game. Now, speaking particularly about Mass Effect, I mean, Knights of the Old Republic 2 has its, KOTOR has its incredible audience as well, so I don't want to diminish that. But just on Mass Effect for 1 second, just to say is that I had heard, and I didn't invent this, but basically some journalist had basically said that Mass Effect was the equivalent of Star Wars, right? There was everything before Star Wars, and then Star Wars, and then everything after it, which was basically some sort of form of kind of either an homage or a copy or some kind of a riff on what was essentially sort of that game-changing moment, and that's what Mass Effect did or was, and so again, to be a small part of that was it's what a privilege.
Ash, why don't you go ahead and follow that up?
So when it came to your video game roles, it looks like the largest portion of them are made up of the Star Wars games, with obviously the biggest role being Carth Onasi, but you did some minor stuff for like some classics like Rogue Squadron and Force Commander, which were some of my favorites growing up. Is it just a coincidence that you did that you do a lot of Star Wars, or do you have a particular fondness of being in Star Wars? Were you like a big fan beforehand?
I was a big fan beforehand, for sure. Yeah. I was like being on Star Trek when I got to be on Star Trek, because I was a huge fan of Star Trek. That was like a whoa moment. Here, sorry, this is the exhibit A of a scruffy dog. Okay, now it's your turn to go down on the floor, if you will. Thank you. Yeah, these look, it was honestly, straight up, it was dumb luck that I got to be in all those wonderful games, and I would have paid them to be in the games because it was so exciting. I am aware of the fact that since I've made those games, there's been the wonderful thing about those games is that they are classics. They've become classics, I guess, and they've been reissued or reconsidered. Was really bummed when I heard that the KOTOR reboot was
yeah, we talked about it a little bit. It's not necessarily dead, but I mean, it just seems like it's going through one of those development hell periods, and it's unfortunate because I think it just resonates with so many people.
I think they want to get it
There's
right
so
too.
much excitement about it, and
Yeah.
I yeah, yeah. Anyway, I was really looking forward to that. But the fact that there's even sort of a push for that, and obviously Mass Effect was when it reissued. These are, I mean, they worked great then, and they still work now, and there's there's 15-year-olds who are just discovering them, in some cases, and who write me and say, "Oh my God, I love this game." At some point they'll be saying, "My grandfather used to play this game," so yeah, it's cool. It's so cool to be a part of, and again, I've been all over the world with the games, and to various conventions, and and the enthusiasm for them doesn't seem to wane. It seems like there's still, kind of, as much passion as ever for these. Again, they're more. I want to say, I say game, but they're life experiences. These worlds that they created.
They truly are. And I was a 30-year-old playing Mass Effect for the first time. So it was and it was I would say it was a pretty life-changing experience in terms of narrative, in terms of character development, and especially thinking of something that came out when it did, because we see video games today and video games 10, 15 years ago are completely different animal. But you see, I think you're absolutely right. That kind of Star Wars homages is there's a lot of parallels to be drawn there, I think. And so you mentioned that your parents were both in theater, and so you've been a part of show business yourself. You were 4 years old when you were on Sesame Street. You basically spent your entire life in this industry. And so what are kind of some of the things, like if you're talking about Raphael's biggest highlights, like what are, and not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be accolades, but just thinking back, and this doesn't necessarily even have to be video game focused. What are some of your biggest highlights that you can remember, whether it be a crew, whether it be just a project that you worked on? And so yeah, what are some of the biggest ones for you?
There's so many. Look, I'll say again, I mean, I'm so privileged to have had decades as an actor, and it's a rough road, right? It's hard. And now I know we'll talk about this later, perhaps, but the strike and everything else, it's a tough time to be an actor now, and it's a reminder how tough a road it is just for anyone to kind of embark on being so bold as to sort of consider themselves an artist, right? So I don't say that pretentiously. I mean that as someone who's committed to trying to kind of really elevate a form of, it's a craft, right? And so the fact that I've been able to is astounding. But that said, things, highlights. I did my first Broadway show at 16 with Faye Dunaway. I did.
Wow.
I graduated as I was graduating high school. I literally had just turned 18, and I went to Chicago and did Risky Business with Tom Cruise, and we just had the 40th anniversary of that, which is astounding. We did a big event around that. We there are other films like My Science Project and Vision Quest that were a blast. Independence Day, Pearl Harbor, TV series The Guardian, which was a blast with Demi Coleman and Simon Baker, and which is a CBS show. Of course, Once Upon a Time. These video games, they're Once Upon a Time was an epic experience, and again, also kind of a profound fandom, and a show that, again, because of the writing, I think translated into so many different cultures and across so many different strata of people who responded to them.
Yeah.
The stories, again, the stories are so important. That's why the writers, here we are in a writer's strike as well. It's without the writers, we are nothing. They are literally the heartbeat once it goes out. I don't care about your AI, you know, scraping other people's work to kind of recreate it. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of a strike, so I don't mean to kind of.
Nope, we fully agree with you on that.
But the writing is the definition of kind of so much, and so you know, I've done 5 shows on Broadway, and I've done plays all over the country, and theater is, you know, where my heart is. I just stepped into a show off Broadway for a few weeks, and just to replace someone who was on vacation, and it was a great fun thing to do. I am love the immediacy of being on stage, and you know, and at some point, you know, obviously being on film and doing various different kinds of film experiences is also, I mean, look, it's wonderful to have such a variety of things to be able, sandboxes to play in. And then I've been directing obviously lately, and that has been an expansion of my desire to want to continue to storytell in different ways. And you know, you mentioned 10 Days in Watts, which was a PBS series that I did, a docu-series. I also did a huge feature called, which is a doc feature called Only in Theaters, which is about a family business that runs an art house cinema chain in Los Angeles. And hello, little one. And basically, you know, I continue to sort of look for ways to kind of play, you know. I guess like a shark, you just keep going until then eventually you just sort of stop.
Yeah, no, that
and then it's game over, right? Yeah, I mean, there's so many wonderful ones, and then lots of small experiences of working on big shows, you know, that were really thrilling as well. So I you know, getting a chance to work with other people who are great at what they do and who are, you know, at the top of their game, and who give, you know, who come to it with all the heart and passion in that moment, and you get to meet that. That's just thrilling, and to be invited into those rooms and onto those sets is really, you know, it's just spectacular.
Awesome. And also, just a quick heads up, we have a third co-host who is having some technical difficulties earlier. If you see another person pop in, just so you're aware, it's not some random person who just happened to hijack our Zoom or anything. Dash, why don't you go with your next one?
So with your long-standing career, video games just happen to be a very small part of it, but you've managed to have 2 major characters in that time. With it being about 10 years since the last time you've done a video game role, is there any, you know, probably hopes of doing more video games in the future? Maybe even.
Yeah, I mean, I was, I don't know what I can say at this point. I was under, you know, hoping to be a part of this, you know, the Knights of the Republic. So now that it's defunct, that was bubbling, and unfortunately, you know, we'll see what happens.
So there were talks, I guess, or
yeah, and some time spent. But anyway, there was also another game that I can't talk about. You know, and here's the thing, you know, like I'm regularly out there looking for new video games, and I'm aware of the fact that you know, when I started, there were a lot less. You know, everyone has a home studio at this point, and I'm aware the fact is that, you know, I'm, by my diversity, that is in terms of being in so many different things, sometimes, you know, the focused approach of just video game work is maybe somewhat diminished, despite the fact that I have people, you know, many people who've talked about how important those games are to them, and or these characters that I've played. I have sometimes, you know, been I'm available, that kind of thing. But I haven't found, you know, someone hasn't rediscovered me yet, or it hasn't been the right combination of things. That there've been, so there are a few in the works, but that I can't, you know, completely talk about. But it isn't like I've turned away from them.
Yeah. Right. So we can look forward to seeing you in something.
Yeah.
In video games.
I love the work. I mean, I love the work. I did a lot of other voiceover stuff for National Geographic and that kind of stuff, and you know, VO, and my own projects. I've done VO just because I'm cheap and available, and I have, you know, it's fun work, you know. It particularly, look, it's great when you get to work with the great players, right, like BioWare. So and that's you know, that's what I continue to aspire to, sort of hopefully be in those rooms.
Here's a good question, I think. Is there a video game franchise that you would like to do in the future?
God, I'm an equal hello. I'm an
Morning.
equal, welcome. We heard that you might be coming.
Yeah, not the benefits of staying up late and then phone not charging.
Oh, there you go.
I think I need a second alarm.
I'm not I'm open to essentially whatever comes. You know, I have you know, the I guess at the end of the day is, you know, where can I contribute, you know, the most, and I'm I you know, I love how games have evolved over the past 15 years, and seeing how that, you know, I perhaps can fit into that. You know, that's I guess the answer is no. I don't have a specific one, and I'm open to all comers, as it were.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Eric, why don't you go in, man?
All right. So nice to meet you. Sorry for being late. How are you doing this morning? First off,
Doing good, man. Doing
good. All right. So I had a few questions, but we'll go with just my one so we don't crunch you for time. For the most part, you have a ton of acting credits to your name so far, but a few years ago you got into directing. Are there any specific projects or any certain type of genres you'd like to direct coming in the future?
Yeah, you know, I've been working in the doc world primarily for a couple reasons. One is that it, you know, if you have an idea, you can kind of go with it. I mean, I have friends, and I've got cameras, and I've got, you know, kind of all the just enough friends to kind of get myself in trouble with kind of, you know, making something and delivering it. I would love to be working in narrative film, and or doing. I've done some, but I'd love to do more. And you know, ultimately, you know, working when and if we ever get back, we will get back to being, you know, doing, you know, working again, being that we're all on strike at the moment, you know, working in some of the wonderful television, kind of narrative television that's being created would be thrilling. Being as a fact is that I was, you know, spent my whole life kind of on those sets. It seems like there's an opportunity for me to kind of, you know, come at it from both sides. That would be great. That would be great.
Awesome. And so we've kind of brushed this topic a little bit throughout the show. So obviously you've been a part of the picket line. The writers and actors strike is going on in Hollywood right now, and we're very, very strong advocates on your guys' behalf. We definitely think writers and actors should have those protections, should be able to make a livable wage. So as somebody who has this longevity in this industry, there's a lot of people who are, this is kind of a penultimate moment for a lot of people who are maybe thinking about coming into the acting industry. What advice would you give someone who is looking to come in, especially with there being these discrepancies in, you know, what these studios are believing people should be paid, and then what they actually should? So wanted to just get your take on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, complicated question because of the two sides of it, because we're in such crisis at the moment, and then the idea of kind of entering into the crisis. It's like, you know, but you know, I got interviewed last week, and someone asked me to comment on the strike, and I didn't say this, just for those people who might have a question about, like, hey, you know, why should we care about a whole bunch of millionaires, you know, getting more money, that is actors. That's their problem, and that's their choice at our employment. Basically, it's kind of this one fellow I was talking to was basically sort of representing, you know, his friends who basically sort of had that point of view. And I, you know, look, the numbers are, for anyone who is unaware, is that 87% of this SAG-AFTRA membership don't make more than $27,000, and that's the demarcation point where you actually get health insurance. That's a giant number.
Yeah.
Giant. And then, in addition to that, the question is, so I put that up. The next question is, how do we protect ourselves? Not just, I mean, it is a business. It's not a nonprofit. Obviously, we all have to work, and we have to figure out a way to kind of make a living in this and keep doing it so that, we can be competitive in a highly competitive and challenging business. The question is, with streaming, which sort of came along and kind of co-opted what was a sort of a very stable business model, which was linear television with commercials, syndication, and then ancillary markets like DVDs or any number of other things. All of those sort of things have sort of been wiped out by streaming, who now basically says, even while the profits have gone up, we don't have the money to pay you, pay you in success. If there's 100 million views of a show like Dahmer, for example, shouldn't we all win in success and be a part of residual structure? And they say no. In addition to that, they refuse to give us any data on how much, how successful they are. And then the larger concern, these are just the kind of the basics, I guess, sort of like Strike 101, I guess, for anyone who wonders, like, why are these 5 actors being so noisy? Probably the most concerning part of this, from the actor's point of view, and there are very specific things that are sort of related to the writers, but from the actor's point of view, AI is terrifying. Now, AI is not going anywhere. We know that it's going to do all sorts of things, but again, I'm on strike, so I'm not allowed to sort of talk about this too much, but let me just sort of put it into this context. I'm in a movie called The Exorcist, which is coming out in October. Yep. It's a big movie, and it's a giant movie with a lot of very fancy people in it, and I'm, again, thrilled to be a part of it. And it's another huge franchise. I was on the set, and it was the largest crew that I'd ever been on. I mean, there's like 200 people on the crew, and everyone on that crew was a subject matter expert. You know what I mean? The best at what they did. You know what I mean? And everyone kind of was a cog in this giant wheel of kind of making sure that everything got delivered. At that point, this is pre-strike. Someone on the crew said, "Hey, you actors, you're not going to go out, are you?" And meaning go on strike. And I said, "Look," I said, we are, as the kind of your last hope of retaining your employment, because if there are no actors, there is no hair, there's no makeup, there's no color correction, there's no focus pullers, there's no visual, there's no effects on set, there's no, like, on and on and on. If we essentially give our image and our ability to kind of recreate us over, and our voice, with no compensation, the movies go away. I mean, making the actual the idea that people would come into a single time and space to create a movie becomes a quaint notion of the past, because it's all done on someone's laptop at home. Now, look, we know that that's going to happen. We know that someone's going to be able to kind of effectively, create a movie with the technology that's now out there, and perhaps, again, scraping story ideas from other people who've done it, very successfully. But the idea that this would not be somehow considered, or that they would say, well, yeah, we'll talk about it later on, or, oh, what they proposed is that background actors get scanned, literally, that their image gets scanned, they get a half a day's pay, and then they can show up anywhere, anytime they want, in perpetuity. These are horrifying kind of the AI question, the larger AI, it's like going to see Oppenheimer finally tomorrow. And you make the bomb, and then you have the social and ethical quandaries of what you do with the bomb. So, my feeling is that AI has this kind of a, nuclear bomb type quotient to it that will wipe out potentially very few industries will be untouched. And so the questions of how we, when you're dealing with tech companies, these are not studios, these are tech companies. This is, this is Apple and Amazon and AT&T, and these are multinational corporations that report to shareholders. They don't give a shit about artists and or people that create them. And so the idea that we would say, oh yeah, we'll just kick the can down the road and don't worry about that, and gee shucks, we know you'll be fair down. They don't care about that. So we're holding a line, and many of us feel like this is the most important strike we've ever had, because we're actually trying to hold a line so that in 10 years that there will be an industry to go back to.
Right.
And that's what feels so sort of bigger than ever before. The entertainment industry, games, movies, films, it's the second largest export in from the United States. It's a giant. The first, by the way, being munitions and weapons. but and it's a huge profit center for the country. So the fact that they would be kind of squeezing the people that make it, the 11,000 writers in the Writers Guild are being essentially now 100 days on the picket line. It's terrible. I'm sorry, I have a lot to say about this.
Oh,
Speak your mind.
This is
That's
amazing.
the whole point why we brought you on, sir.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge. There's some very basic kind of pay us more, you're not paying us enough kind of things, which is what every strike is about. But then there are these larger kind of ethical the stakes are so high relative to then the future of the industry and or any of our ability as artists to want to continue to sort of do it and be able to do it. So that's what this moment in time is. And unfortunately, as we record this, basically I woke up this morning and heard that the meeting that they were supposed to have yesterday to kind of resume talks blew up terribly, and so it's we're going back to the line basically. So it's a tough time, and many of us are trying to figure out ways to kind of keep our chins up, because it's disheartening, and the message that's being communicated by the lack of as these guys, and they're all white men, basically make these crazy salaries, crazy numbers, and then say we don't have the money to pay you. It doesn't. The message is pretty sort of disheartening.
Yeah. I think there was some report, and we had a conversation. One of our previous guests is also on the picket line, and he kind of shared his experience with us. But I think it was, if they skimmed, what was it, like 8% just off the top end of these people that you're talking about, in terms of the pay issue, that basically solves the entire thing. It's not rocket science to be able to go ahead and fix it. You just have to. It's just these guys who are making 500 million over 3 years or whatever, that takes care of that. But then, just like you said, there's other things that go into this. There's protections for AI. There's protections.
Residuals.
Exact residuals is another, and that's a big thing with streamers, is that that's not a thing. And so it's just like you said, Dahmer gets all of this acclaim. It's the most watched show, and we read about like the Squid Games writer who he makes the most popular show in Netflix history and basically hasn't seen a dime from it. And so
$750, yeah,
yeah.
right. So that's what we're talking about. And how do you survive doing what you do if you can't somehow, is it a hobby? or is it actually a way that you can sort of, pay your rent and
Right.
feed your family, etc. And many of us who dedicate our lives to it, feel passionately that this is an opportunity to be able to kind of, want to bring everything we have to it. And if we can't afford to do it, then that's why then again, the kind of the existential crisis that then comes over, like, well, can people still keep doing it? And then people invariably are going to have to, maybe reevaluate that. Yeah.
Well, Raphael, I speak for all of us when I say this has been absolutely amazing. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We also wanted to give you a second. Is there anything that you wanted to plug in? I know you've talked at length about the strike, and I know that because of that, it kind of limits what you can and can't talk about in terms of like promotion, things like that. But we also just wanted to give you a sec if there was anything you wanted to kind of plug in before we go ahead and end here.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, look, the thing that I'm most passionate about at the moment is this movie Only in Theaters that I did, which you can find at onlyintheaters.com. It's also available on Amazon, by the way. And it's critically been a huge success. We played in theaters all over the country, 80 theaters, and are now on Amazon. And it really is a powerful, moving story about a family business. But it speaks to kind of the heart of Hollywood and then the future movie theaters, which I feel passionately about. So that's something I feel very strongly about. I guess I just want to reiterate what I said at the top, which is just, what a privilege it is to be in a community that is people within the video game community, and to be, representing these characters and again, to be a small part of these giant cultural kind of gathering points. I'm always happy to come and talk about it. So thanks for reaching out.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Well, with that, we will go ahead and we'll end this interview. Everybody else, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.